City Hall. Yeah, there it is, all lit up nicely in memory of Mr. Floyd. Their City Hall was lit yellow, pink and turquoise in remembrance of his death, and all black lives lost in the aftermath. Mr. Floyd died in Minneapolis, of course, after police officer Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck. Tomorrow marks 1 year to the day of his death. Quite why they did this on Saturday, I don't know. He was found guilty, of course, Chauvin, and is due to be sentenced in June. In all probability, he will correctly spend the rest of his life in jail. But why has the death of George Floyd become an annual event, it seems, here? Let's speak to Maurice Mcleod, CEO of Race on the Agenda. Can you square this circle, Maurice? Good afternoon to you.
Hello, Ian. Well, when you say square the circle, I think maybe you're slightly misunderstanding what I imagine Norwich are doing, which is not so much commemorating George Floyd. Well, of course, that was the thing that sparked last year's global uprising. It's commemorating that demand for an end to structural racism. So it's not about this one awful killing, as you say. Hopefully, Derek Chauvin's about to find some sort of justice for what he did. So it's not really about that. It's about what that death meant to the world, not just to America.
But that would be any time, any crime, anything, wouldn't it? I mean, you could always take any kind of, it seems to me this death was on the telly. We all saw it, and we can't change that. And it kind of livened us up in many respects to things that can go on. But ultimately, it was a crime of one man killing another. And that's it, really, isn't it? Terrible as it was.
Well, no.
It's not a race-related crime. There was no racial component to it, and yet for some reason that's become the narrative.
Yeah. Okay. So what I think you're doing there is you can look at Derek Chauvin and go, bad apple. Yeah. All right. We need to fix that. It's what the protests were saying is that the barrel is bad, that the actual structure is bad. That's why it keeps happening. If Derek Chauvin was a one-off and George Floyd was a one-off, yeah, it would probably it wouldn't have garnered the public support that it had. It's because so many he was just symbolic of all the other.
Yes, he was. But I mean, since 2020, twice as many white people have been killed by police as black people. Now, I know there's a percentage issue there as well, but even so, it's not a good look all round. I mean, when it comes to what happens with the police and killing, whether it was seen as legitimate in the American legal rule book, as many of them seem to be, both black and white, or whether it was illegal in the case of Derek Chauvin, remains to be seen over the scale of all of those people. But more white people are killed by cops than black.
Yeah, and
so it's just not a black issue, is it really? People just make it up and pretend it is.
No, if you look at the percentage of people in America, it's not 50-50. So you're still more likely to be, as an individual black person, you're more likely to be killed by the police than as an individual white person.
Yes, but it's perilously close in some respects. And also, if you look at, as I mentioned from one of our black contributors who made the point, and I've made this point as well, that we need to look for other reasons here. If 54% of violent crimes are carried out by blacks in America, despite only making up 14%, then that does perhaps begin to explain why those people might come into contact more with the police. It's about availability sometimes, availability on the streets. And clearly the police come into contact with more blacks than whites in those areas, hence the numbers.
Well, I mean, there's so much evidence that police action in America in particular, but here as well, is targeted on areas that have large black populations. Now, you might say, what you're arguing is, because they do more crime, therefore that's why the police target those areas and look, and picking up more people. But black people are the victims of those crimes.
Correct.
That 54% that you just spoke about, black people are the victims, and they feel incredibly under-policed. When black people are, often in America, when black people call the police, they end up becoming the victims, even if they call police to help them. So I don't think you can I don't think you can remove race from it. That's what millions of people all around the world realise, that this is very much linked to race.
But what's interesting is that there literally is no evidence of that. And yet we've somehow created a global frenzy. And over there in Norwich, I don't know if you've ever been to Norwich, Maurice, but it's a fine old city, Norwich. But they're illuminated the City Hall, big old light show for a crime that happened 4,000 miles away with no racial component, even though I know you want to think there is. And I mean, it's a head-scratching moment. This is perpetuating the problem, isn't it?
It's only, I'm afraid, I'm sorry to say, it's only head scratching if you choose not to understand. As I said, it's not about commemorating a crime, it's about commemorating the battle to fight systemic racism.
But if it wasn't a racist crime, why would they be doing that? I mean, there might be many other crimes you could look at and say maybe that needs to be addressed. And why are we importing the problems there over here when we don't have that track record?
But that's your argument, which I disagree with, that it wasn't a racial crime. That doesn't mean Derek Chauvin went and killed him because he saw a black guy and wanted to do it. But the fact that he could kneel there, looking at cameras quite nonchalantly, because he kind of knew,
Well, almost the nonchalance was almost his defence in a way. It's interesting that he never got to take the stand because, you have to be a particularly, stupid may be too much of a cheeky word to describe somebody who has killed somebody or murdered somebody in this respect. But, the fact that he was sitting there so nonchalantly probably would say to most lawyers, he really didn't think he was doing anything wrong. I mean, there's a psychopathic nature to that.
Exactly the point. He didn't think, or he didn't think that what he was doing would be punished because it never normally is. The reason there was such celebration when Chauvin was found guilty is that's really rare, ever for a police officer to be found guilty for killing a black person. So he kind of thought, you know what, I don't care.
Or a white person for that matter. So that's because they're not, according to the rule book, they're not usually guilty.
The only other person ever in that state to be accused, a police officer, to be committed for killing a civilian was when a black police officer killed a rich white woman some years ago. So yes, it's not surprising.
So you would support the fact that he went to jail, the black cop?
Of course, absolutely. Any police officer that
it's an unlawful killing. I get. Listen, Maurice, we stopped there for no other reason than time, and I want to get a call in as well. Thank you, Maurice Mcleod, CEO of Race on the Agenda. We did.